I am busy. And I really think that a lot of leaders think that being busy is a badge of honor and that it's going to impress their team. And so I think that's one of the biggest myths, that being busy equals better when it comes to your team. You have to be really mindful of the weather that you are bringing into any room.
Who doesn't want to be a great leader? A leader who's calm under pressure, insightful, respected, well-liked. But what does it take to become a great leader? Hey, I'm Boo, and welcome to my podcast. The Few Leadership Podcast defines great leadership and what great leadership looks like. And I've found some of the world's best leaders or experts in the field of leadership to help you accelerate your leadership journey so you can be an ace at the game of leadership. If you're ready to rethink everything you know about leadership, if you're excited about accelerating your leadership journey, let's strap in and ignite your leadership potential. All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Few Leadership Podcast, the speaker series, where we are unlocking the big brains of people that live and breathe leadership so you can accelerate your leadership game, because that's what it's all about. It's all about growth. It's all about a journey. And the faster we can roll through that journey, the better leaders that we become. Lisa Even, thank you so much for coming on the Few Leadership Podcast. I'm looking forward to you having a ripple effect on the folks that are listening to us today. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now let's get into this. I know leadership is harder now than it's ever been before. What do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the modern digital era?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that there are so many avenues to lead. Whether you've got a hybrid team or an in-person team or a team that's first shift, second shift, third shift, there are so many versions of it. And I have some great things to share today around how do you look at a pocket of people and say to yourselves, okay, how do I get them to not maybe be a little bit toxic? And how do I get them to enjoy their work? And how do I get them to meet all of those metrics? And I think that sometimes we want to be like A plus B equals C. And so I'm excited to talk about how maybe A plus B doesn't equal C in some instances. There are some different things you can do in different arenas and moments of your day.
I'm going to go right into one of our segments right off the bat, because you've kind of turn out a little bit. The myth being that A plus B equals C. We have a segment here called Myth Busting.
Yeah.
And this segment is really, what are some of the stories leaders tell themselves that are myths?
Yeah, one of the things that leaders tell themselves, and I share a lot in story form. I'm a keynote speaker by trade, so I do a lot of storytelling and then strategy giving. And so I'm going to share a really quick story about a moment in my journey, which a lot of us, maybe you're driving to work and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, that's me. And I worked for a large healthcare system. I managed multiple locations. One morning I had I worked for healthcare. So one of our doctors walked through and we had just finished our morning huddle. A few of us were still kind of milling around waiting, like, have a great day. And one of the persons that was in the group goes, oh my gosh, that doctor, she always looks just a little bit disheveled. She is the cutest. And this doctor did. She always carried like a million pieces of paper. She could never find her glasses. Hair was always like kind of off to one side. And then, just kind of naturally, the group started to go around and point to each other and say, well, you show up like this. Well, you show up like that. It got to be my turn, and I'm the leader of this team. And without skipping a beat, one of my team members, Haley, looks at me and she goes, you show up busy. And I laughed my way through it like, oh, ha, 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 right? Like, ha.
Everyone loves getting feedback off their team, right?
Oh, no. I was horrified. And I walked back to my office. It was a really long walk, but it wasn't, because it was just, down the hall. And I'm like, I am not busy. I am energetic and I am fun and I'm getting a lot done, but I am not busy. And after about a couple of days, I'm like, I am busy. That's the presence. That's what they first meet when they meet me. And I really think that a lot of leaders think that being busy is a badge of honor and that it's going to impress their team. Because in my mind, I was like, I'm going to get this taken care of for us. I'm going to move all the barriers. I'm going to take care of everyone. But what inadvertently it was doing was actually causing people to avoid me. And they're like, she doesn't have time. I'm not going to bother her with this. And so I think that's one of the biggest myths, is that being busy equals better when it comes to your team. And I'm not saying don't be busy. I'm just saying that the energy that you bring into the room, they always say, like, you bring the weather. You have to be really mindful of the weather that you are bringing into any room, because the senior leader needs a different type of weather than that frontline staff member. And depending on if you've got a mix, you might have to flex a little bit to be able to make some progress in getting answers or information or even collaboration.
Yeah, I think busy is the curse of the modern era. I think particularly people that have a lot of capacity, and you would say most folks that get put into leadership positions are in that role because they've got more capacity. They just say, you know what, rather than just do my work, why don't I do all 10 of my team's work as well, because I got all this capacity. You see, you're curious around culture, and obviously, you know, your philosophy around the ripple effect means that one small thing that you do ripples through an organization. And I would assume that means that ripple effect is the culture that you create as a result of the small things that you can do. What do people get wrong around that word culture? I mean, it's thrown around a lot, right? Like if you look at indigenous cultures, that's a culture, right? If you go to France and you're in Paris, it's slightly different culture to Marseille. You go into the deep south of the US, the culture is different to if you're up in New Hampshire. So when we talk about culture, what on earth are we talking about?
Yeah. So culture to me, and I love this definition because it's all the ways of being. All the ways of being. And oftentimes I'll be with a group of people and I will give them a sheet of paper and I will have them draw basically 2 lines so that there are 3 columns on the sheet. And I will say, we're going to look at all the ways that you are being, that your team is being, because we put those together, whether it's traditions or holidays, it's unwritten rules, it's how people are behaving. We're going to map that out, and then we're going to stand back almost as if we're, you know, a stranger to it. And we're going to say, do we like them? Like, is that what we're going for? And there are 3 components, I believe, to culture, and they are attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. Attitudes, behaviors, beliefs. Attitudes really being kind of the snapshot of the day. If I invited your team to stand right behind me and I said, hey guys, we're going to take a picture. Everybody give me the face that they're feeling right now. You know, like half the room, if they were really dealing with maybe a tight deadline, or they've been working nonstop, or maybe they're really cranky about, you know, org changes or what have you, we would see a very interesting picture. So I asked them to write down their attitudes, because that's temporary. That's like today, how we feeling? And then I say, okay,
let's like a real medical thing to do when you've got those 10 steps of pain and you've got the little faces. And
exactly.
You're trying to write, how do you feel today? Like
1
show
to
up.
3. Exactly. That's exactly it. Because oftentimes, again, in that badge of busy or what have you, right? You don't pause and think, how are they? How are my people? How is my team? And then that second column is really the behaviors. What is it common to see? I do it with high school students. I'll say, okay, if we were all out in the parking lot and we had all the people divided into their like group or their teams, like who would be the loudest? And they're like, the football team, like, right? They're always horsing around. And then I'm like, okay, well, who would be a little quieter? And they're like, you know, the chess team. Well, our ecosystems within our organizations are similar to that too. I give a list of the common things that I see, like maybe we walk out of a meeting and we turn to each other and we say, oh, that could have been an email. I don't know why we're meeting. Or maybe it's very common if you walk over to somebody at their desk and they just keep typing. And they're like, what? They don't even look up. Like, what are those micro behaviors? Because everything you say and do is a ripple, happy or crappy your choice. What are those behaviors that we're seeing? Is it complaining? Is it actually on the flip side where people are covering for people when they're on vacation? That you come back from vacation and your inbox is clear. What is it normal to see? People usually can get like 3 to 4, and then they go back to their meetings like an hour later and they're like, we started our meeting complaining. Like someone's like, how was your weekend? And they're like, oh, let me tell you. And then the next person says, well, let me tell you. And then that third piece is really the beliefs. And those are the things that we deeply hold. Attitudes, as you can imagine, turn into behaviors, which turn into beliefs. Like if you have a new person training and the person training them says, oh, nothing ever changes around here. That's a belief. When we think about, too busy to be friendly, I watched a group of my team members and I'm like, are we too busy to be friendly? And they're like, oh yeah, we've got lives to save. I don't have time for friendly. I'm like, really? Okay. Right. It's all of those attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs, and your ability as a leader to zoom out, analyze it, right? Assess it. What do we want to keep and what do we want to get rid of? And then the third piece is really zooming back in and having a conversation with your team. If you got weird behaviors and dysfunctions going on, it's your job to be the quarterback and say, hey, can we talk about this? So that's a high level, probably a lot more information than you were guessing you were going to get. But that's my take on culture is that ability to assess and address attitudes, behaviors,
I think it just goes back to the whole conscious, subconscious, unconscious, where, the subconscious is just looking for a direction. And if you set the wrong direction in the morning, that's where your subconscious goes and fills. And, we're creatures of habit. We prefer repetition and normalization rather than growth and change.
Yeah.
So I love this word behavior, and I have a 4-year-old. So when we
in it.
when we talk about behavior, really we're talking about good behavior, bad behavior, right? Not really talking about the fact that a behavior is something that you can control. It's an action. It's what you do. It's what you do. And I think there's a little bit like ego. People like, you say, hey, it's your ego's getting in the way. And they think, I don't have a big ego. It's like, no, ego is you. It's you. It's how you're showing up. Your opinion of you is getting in the way of where we are at the moment. Humans being humans as well. This is all great, right? Yep. I've got to, define my attitude. I've got to shape my behaviors. This is all telling people what to do. And generally speaking, humans hate that, right? Like we all hate being told what to do. So how do we do it then? Like if we can't tell people, how do we create that environment where they feel compelled to follow and compelled to go on that journey?
Yeah. So I tend to be a fairly kind but firm leader when it comes to what I will put up with. And so when I interview someone, I tell them, hey, this is how we solve on our team. Like, here's how we actually do it. So for an example, we had, and I picked these like mundane, very daily things because I think you'll have more complex things, but I want you to relate to like a daily thing. So I worked in a very large hospital. One of the locations, this hospital had about 900 patient beds. So there are about 6,000 people at any given time, which is more people than my hometown growing up. And in this building, there are every type of service imaginable, right? Like we've got laundry service, we've got dining services. It's literally a city. And so I think about our, part of that hospital being our own little ecosystem. We had this issue where people were going to Starbucks, which we had one in our building, and not telling anybody and not coming back quickly. And by the fourth person that comes to me and says, hey, are you going to yell at Sally so-and-so for going to Starbucks? I don't think we should be able to go to Starbucks. This is a behavior, right? I'm starting to see a trend where people are going willy-nilly over to Starbucks. And so I got thinking, well, how do we get in discussion about that? So I bought bow ties and long ties from Goodwill. I washed them. I brought them to our morning meeting and I said, hey, we have 10 minutes. We're going to start to solve this. And I said, hey, could you put on your tie? Welcome to leadership. And it was really more this like nod to the fact that I wanted them to feel like a leader. Half the people put them on. I was laughing. I'm like, how many people are actually going to put on these bow ties and be like, what is Lisa up to today? And I said to them, hey, we have this opportunity to solve. I've had a number of people come to my office and say, I think we should go to Start. We can do it. No, we can't. And I said, welcome to leadership. Let's talk about it. So I put them in pods of 4 people. I gave them almost 5 minutes to discuss it. And I said, what should we do? Well, and it was interesting because someone raised their hand and they're like, well, is it in the handbook? I'm like, it's not in the handbook. Someone else goes, well, maybe there's a policy on our portal. I said, look it up. There was not a policy on our portal. So it's all these things that you don't have an official rule for. We ultimately determined that depending on the group of people, so depending on if you imagine in a clinic, the front desk can't just be like, see ya, we're going to Starbucks, because somebody might walk in. And so they had a rotation and they came up with a mini process that worked for that group. My nurses, they're very much more scheduled. So if they don't have a patient for 30 minutes, they know they have a break. They had a whiteboard that they wrote on and they went to Starbucks. And my point here is really this idea that You have to get in discussion about how are we going to solve it and what does it look like, current state, future state. It took us a couple of times to really solve it, but the idea is that you're going to contribute to this. And some people were like yawning, like, I don't care about Starbucks. And I'm like, great, you don't have to. You don't have to. But for the people that this matters to, welcome to leadership. Let's go. So I would say getting in discussion with people. I have a really great one-on-one form that asks people focused questions of like, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are your thoughts? The more input you can gather, and I'm talking targeted input, not all input. I want us to solve this Starbucks problem here today. What are your thoughts? If someone brings up something else that they're mad about from 10 years ago, I'm like, okay, yep. Can we solve that after we solve Starbucks? We're going to come back to that. So I think that that's one of the biggest tools that you can use is to get in discussion. I always say, try on their glasses, like see it from their angle. And then you can start to unravel and be like, oh, I see. Got it. Easier said than done, I know. But people appreciate being asked. And if you can ask in a way that actually feels like you care, oftentimes they'll perk up a little bit and be like, all right, here's what I think. And off to the races you can go.
If you're enjoying the show, I'd just like to ask of you a little favor. We're on a mission here to ignite the world's leadership potential. We need to reach out to as many leaders as we possibly can. So if you're enjoying the show, I just ask you to leave a review, to subscribe, to help introduce this podcast to other leaders to join you on your journey to flawless leadership. We're going to head back to the episode now. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today. Please remember, let's ignite a movement of flawless leaders. Subscribe, leave a review. Let's get back to the show.
I think you mentioned something, you probably didn't notice it, but to me, I laser in on this comment, which is like future state, current state. And I think one of the challenges with leaders is there's a lot of future state talk and there's a lot of current state talk, and there's not a lot of talk when you put them together.
Yeah.
And I think as a fighter pilot, that's how we're trained. Right?
You're trained.
What is the objective? What happened? Why is there a gap? And what's one thing we can do to close it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously you're doing that instinctively, which is super powerful. And just if you're listening to this, there is a system to do this. It's super simple.
Absolutely.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. But I think also what you've highlighted there as well is the 10-year axe to grind. I mean, isn't that incredible that someone hasn't resolved something for 10 years and how quickly you can do that? And I've certainly run sessions before where you talk this future state, current state. People are like, gosh, why didn't we do this 2 years ago? It's like, yeah, why didn't you? Like, that's
why didn't we?
We have another segue. It's called what's your call sign? So in that role there, and in that leadership role, what do you think the team would have called you if you had a fighter pilot call sign?
Oh, I love this, actually. I hope that they would have called me something that alluded to like work hard, play hard, because I think that the culture that I wanted to build was really this idea that
probably would have been Rodman, like
yes.
Like Dennis Rodman. It'd be something like that.
You can kick butt and also work really hard and be productive. And I think that was the thing I was always pushing for. We were in the neurosciences space, so you can imagine we were giving bad news to patients hour in and hour out about a condition that you have a brain tumor, you have cancer, you've got a nerve compression, you've got Parkinson's, like you're never getting better, sorry. And if you're going to live in an environment, and probably similar to the fighter pilot world, where it's really high stakes, you have to like turn the pressure valve down. There has to be a bit of levity somewhere, and not with our patients, not, forward facing, but behind the scenes, you do have to have another emotion than, fight or flight. And so I would really want that to be, I wrote a book called Joy is My Job, and it's kind of my side passion of how my husband and I track joy like a bank account. It's a metric in our family. Our kids do it. Your 4-year-old, this is a whole nother thing, but your 4-year-old should be doing it. And it's this idea that you choose it and you're saying to yourselves, I may not have time, I may not have money, I may not have all these things, but I still can have a little bit of joy. And I think that that's what I hope my team felt is we're going to work hard, we're going to save lives, and we're also going to have a little fun doing it. Because 90,000 hours in the workforce, 40 years, 40 hours a week, that's a lot of hours to just be in fight or flight mode.
Yeah, it weighs you down, right? That's where the
risk
comes. I mean, you've got a body full of cortisol. It's not doing any good neurochemistry through your body. So
right.
Why did you do this though? So why did you go from being in a world where obviously, you're in the healing world. I mean, you're what they say, you're kind of a warrior or a healer. And then all of a sudden decide that, you know what, I got some stuff to share. Like, what was the moment that you transitioned? Because also you're fight or flighting a little bit there as well, going from comfortable in a leadership role, full of purpose, and then to step out of that and conceptualize this ripple effect. Like, why did you do it?
It's funny. It was almost slightly unintentional, which I think a lot of things in life are of like, oh, I kind of, but I had people starting to call me pretty regularly to say, hey, how did you do that? Like, I want my team to look like your team, or, I heard you use this tool or this process. Can I get a copy of that? And I started to get people even outside of my organization that were saying things like, can you share that with me? And then off to the side, I had someone say, hey, I would love to have you speak at an event. Would you be willing to do it? And I'm thinking, well, I speak all the time internally. And then I spoke at that event and someone else was like, you can do this as a career. Like, you can find spaces and places to go and teach and train. And I was like, So we were moving from Wisconsin back to Iowa. And I turned to my husband and we kind of talked. He's like, you better go for it. Like, there will be no more like convenient time to say, we're moving states, which means we're moving jobs, which means you should go out and try this. And so that's what I did. So I spent the first couple of years really teaching and training. And then this last couple of years, I've done a combination of that plus like big stage where you're, in front of a larger audience for a 1-hour keynote, which has been really fascinating and neat to see both sides of, training with your, rolling your sleeves up versus like, I have 1 hour. What can I give you so that you go back and change your team and have good ripple effect?
What is the most profound ripple effect that you've seen?
Ooh, there's a couple of them. Probably unrelated to team culture, but it was more on the joy side. I had someone mail me a card and it said, thanks to you, my husband and I are staying together. And it was this idea where she came to one of my sessions, and sometimes I'll do like a half culture, half joy, and I'll kind of, sneak both in there. And it was one of those sessions, and she went home and looked at her husband and said, joy is our job. So we either make joy our job or we get a divorce. And they had 8 or 9 joy dates is what they called it. And they stayed together. And I think about the power of just being able to share a piece of information with someone and them take it into their lives. That was really humbling for me to be like, yeah, you can make a difference. You can make a good ripple effect in your personal or professional lives.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? It's just so easy to just get into the grind. And, a lot of influencers and a lot of people that profess success, they lean into the grind, right? That's what they say. It's all about doing hard things. I mean, even Gary Vee is one of the happiest people on earth. He's always talking about the grind. And I think, you've only got a certain amount of time to tell a story. And the story that gets lost in the grind is, oh, by the way, you still got to do fun things.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
We are fundamentally designed to be miserable all the time. We are designed to combine these emotions together.
Yes.
What do you think are the common mistakes that leaders make in terms of, I guess, not throwing that first pebble into the water? Like where does first of all, I'd imagine being busy is one of those. Like if you're too busy, you're not aware. But what is it that, a leader could do in the next 24 hours? And this segues.
Yep.
Segment's called the 24-hour challenge. Like, what is one thing a leader can do immediately off this podcast to just get the ripples flowing?
Yeah, I would say, okay, they're basically the same thing, but 2 little like nuances to it. I think the first thing is get to know your team and get to know them from the standpoint of, when you go to the doctor and we, check your heart rate, we weigh you, we do all these things to just like check in on you prior to even asking you, why are you here today? It's like kind of this little bit of a check-in. And I think getting to know your team from the standpoint of like what's going on, this PB&J worksheet that I'll share with you, it really is about, you need to know them from like a personal perspective. Like, is their mom going through cancer? Do they have a kid's soccer game this weekend? And really just understanding like, what does life look like outside of work? Because it all spills into work. And then are there better ways to do things? I'm often just getting curious. And this is the second component is like, get to know them. But here's how I do it is I ask very person-focused questions. I get very curious of like, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you fix around here? It is shocking how many people I will ask that question to. And then I'll say, well, do you know how to solve it? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, and then I jokingly say, how long have you known how to solve this? And they're like, oh, 2 years. I brought it up 2 years ago in a meeting and everybody shut it down. So I thought, screw it. I don't care. And I'm like, so you have known the answer on how to solve something for 2 years. And they're like, yeah. And I get even more curious and I'm like, all right, so if we were to like go out there and do this right here, right now, what would it look like? And I think that there's this combination of the more you get to know about someone's personal life, the more they trust you. And if you're also engaging them from a person-focused angle, not necessarily, what do we think should be done, but like, what do you think should be done? How do you see it? That is pretty powerful. A lot of leaders, I think that they go in and they see a problem and they love the problem more than they love the human in front of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. I remember one of my first, I'm like, my, hands are on my head. After the scenario, I'll never forget this. I had a team member who was constantly late to work. So I remember I pulled her into a room and I was like, Tammy, I've noticed you're late. We can no longer, this is unacceptable, right? Like I go into almost like pointing out the problem as if it were on a clipboard and being like, do you see it? Do you see it? And, the situation kind of almost blew up in my face. Thank goodness, for whatever reason, I said, can I just ask why you're late? Like I stopped myself just enough to ask that singular question. And she goes, oh, well, my mom is going through cancer treatment. So every morning I drive over and I give her her medicine. It has to be administered within like a 30-minute window. And she goes, oh, one of the bridges that I usually take to I lived in Milwaukee, which was a very big city. She goes, one of the bridges is under construction. And I was like, oh, got it. I was like, so you're not trying to, be this like naughty employee is what was going through my head of like, you're not trying to be a terrible human. And I said, first off, I'm so sorry about your mom. She's like, I'm like, how long does she have to take this medicine? She's like, oh, 6 more weeks. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, how long is that bridge under construction? She's like, I think it's done next week. So I was making this really big, assumption that she was being, disrespectful and not productive and all the things. And I said to her, would it are you going to be like 10, 15 minutes late for the next 6 weeks? And she kind of looked at me and she goes, yeah, I'm so sorry. And I said, that's okay. We can deal with that. Right. It was just it was realizing that circumstance and that situation was not about this human trying to ruin things. And we had a conversation about like, if that's going to be, if you're going to be taking care of her, we just need to be talking about it. And she literally like 2 years later was like, thank you for just giving me a little bit of flexibility during a really hard time. And I was like, absolutely. So being person focused and finding out what's going on helps. Now it's different. We can get into the performance of like, this person's always like that. Okay, that's a different type of human. But if you've got someone who I say is teetering on the edge of like used to do really well, now is kind of like not doing something they should be, get curious, try on their glasses, and you'll be shocked at what you find.
Yeah, and that's the challenge with leadership because you're the one that owns all the metrics, right? One that gets measured on the metrics and you just push that down, but that's not leadership. That's just facilitation, right? So it's important to really, drill down in behind that. So listeners, we get towards the end of the podcast now. We've got one 24-hour challenge, the PB&J. We got that one, click. But, if someone really wants to drive, let's call it a recurring growth element to their leadership game, what's one or two things that you would advise a leader to do off the podcast to consistently do? Even if it's just one thing.
Yep.
And if you're busy, you're overwhelmed, you're in fight, flight, or freeze, what is a way in which we can build a trigger or something that will lift our behavior as a leader and deliver the results that we want?
Yeah, that's a really great, part of me is like, I want to give you 50. I would say the one thing that I have really done in my leadership practice, and I would recommend it for others, is you don't have to match the energy around you. And what I mean by that is if you've got someone that's really upset and you get really upset, or you're like, he was yelling at me, so I yelled at him, or, whatever it is, if you can get your emotion into this like idea of being able to take a timeout, like timeout, they are really heated in this moment. Let me find out why. Or you've got a metric that you're like, gosh, this isn't where we need it to be. My biggest tool is like, take a timeout. Like, don't let your energy rise. Kind of zoom, stand back, and think about like, what would I need to do here? Because oftentimes in leadership, we think that reactive means we'll figure it out, fix it, fix it, fix it. And I'm like, no, pause. That's actually a better reaction. Take a time out. What does this need? And oftentimes, when you want to send a really mean email, you're like, I just want to chill them. I was like, wait 24 hours and you'll probably say something different. Most things, other than maybe some brain surgery, which was where I was at, but most things are not needing a reaction in the next 15 minutes. And so if you can get into that practice of not matching their energy and saying, time out, what does this need? Whether it's a frontline team member, a senior leader, someone just isn't kind to you and you just want to like snap back, you don't have to. Like give it some space and then really be proactive, almost like current state, future state of like, what does this need? And how do I get there? That's the biggest gift I think you can give yourself is the pause.
I love it. We have a saying in as fighter pilots, when something happens and you feel stressed or you don't know what's going on, sit on your hands, don't push any buttons.
Yeah.
Same thing, right? It's pause.
Yeah.
It's allow the adrenaline to subside in your system and let the blood go from the body and the fists and the legs back into the brain so you can think clearly. Lisa, that's super insightful. I really appreciate you your closing on that. Folks, if you're looking to connect with Lisa, her details are down, scroll down, you'll see them. LisaEvan.com. If you're listening and you don't have the opportunity to touch your phone, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the Few Leadership Podcast Speaker Series. I can just feel the value oozing through the podcast, and I can see also that you're just one of those people that is actually full of joy. So thank you for sharing that with us all here on the podcast today. Very grateful.
Absolutely.